April 1945. Somewhere in western Germany, in a city the Third Army had already cleared and left behind. The rubble was still settling, the smoke was still rising, and 6 children were sitting in the dark of a collapsed apartment building, in a basement that was now the only room left standing. No adults, no papers, no one who knew their names. A corporal named Dean Aldrich found them when he shouldn't have been in that building at all. He radioed his lieutenant. The lieutenant radioed up. The report that eventually landed on Patton's desk was 2 sentences long. This is what happened next. Aldrich was 22, from Evansville, Indiana. He was not a medic. He was not a civil affairs officer. He had no training for what he found. 6 children, the youngest maybe 3 years old. The oldest a girl of about 11, sitting with her back against the wall and a small child across her lap. She did not run. She did not cry. She just watched him. Aldrich held out his ration tin. None of them moved until the girl gave a small nod. Then the smaller ones reached for it. He radioed Lieutenant Frank Cobble. Cobble was 26, from rural Georgia, and he understood immediately that this was not his problem to solve in any simple way. He knocked on 3 doors in the surrounding block. 2 did not open. The third opened to a woman who shook her head before he finished the sentence. She had 4 children of her own. She had no food to spare. She closed the door. Cobble filed a report upward. He called it, in his own words, a civilian nuisance matter. That phrase would come back to him. You have to understand what had happened 3 days earlier in a town about 15 kilometers west. A civil affairs officer trying to move fast had handed a group of displaced German civilians, including children, over to a local church elder he had not fully vetted. The elder turned out to have been a Nazi block warden. The story surfaced fast. The officers involved were burned hard. After that, a directive came down. Do not place German civilians with unchecked local authorities. Nobody included instructions on what to do instead. So when Cobble's report reached Captain Harold Metz, the Battalion S4 officer, Metz knew exactly what he couldn't do. He suggested leaving rations at the building and moving on. Third Army doesn't run orphanages. That was not wrong as a fact, but his superior had read the directive. He would not sign off on it, not after what happened 15 kilometers west. He passed the report to regimental staff with a note that said simply, "Refer to civil affairs." Regimental staff sat on it for 6 hours. Then a staff officer read both the report and the attached summary of the earlier incident. Someone had paper clipped them together, deliberately, and understood what he was actually looking at. This was not a traffic problem. This was not a nuisance. If something happened to those children, and it came out that the report had sat on a desk for 6 hours while the Army moved forward, the story would not stay small. He forwarded it upward with a note of his own. Requires command-level decision. When it reached Patton's desk, it came as a 2-page document, 2 sentences of actual report, 1 full page of attached context about the earlier incident. His aide expected him to send it back down with a sharp note and a name attached. Patton read both sheets. Then he asked his aide how far the building was. The aide said 40 minutes. Patton said nothing else. He got in his Jeep. Nobody on his staff knew exactly why he was moving. They assumed a frontline inspection. PFC Otto Dreyer, 24, German-American from Milwaukee, was pulled along as interpreter. He later wrote about the drive in a letter to his mother. He said Patton did not explain anything. He just sat in the front and watched the road. When the Jeep stopped in front of the building, the officers already at the scene came to attention, expecting to be dressed down for escalating a minor problem to the commanding general of the Third Army. That was what they expected. Patton looked at the building. Then he looked past them. Elsa was sitting at the top of the basement stairs. She had heard the Jeep. She had come up to look. She was 11 years old, and she was not hiding. Patton walked toward her. Dreyer followed 1 step behind. The other officers stayed at street level. At the top of the stairs, Patton stopped. He crouched slightly, lowering himself in the doorframe so he wasn't filling it. He looked at Dreyer. "Ask her how long they've been here." Dreyer translated. The girl answered without looking away. She says, 3 days. "Ask her where her mother is." Dreyer asked. The girl's answer was flat, factual. She says her mother went to find food 3 days ago. Patton looked at the children below. 5 of them, sitting in the dark. Then back at the girl. "Ask her if she's been feeding the small ones." The girl answered. Dreyer translated quietly. She says she found half a sack of flour. Patton did not respond to that immediately. He looked at the smallest child, who was sitting on a piece of broken concrete with a piece of cloth across its shoulders. He was still for a moment. Then, "Tell her we're going to take them somewhere warm." Dreyer translated. The girl did not move. She asked something back. Dreyer hesitated before translating it. "She wants to know if they'll be able to come back." Patton looked at her directly. "Tell her, yes." That was the part most people missed when the story was repeated later. Not that Patton came personally. Not that a commanding general drove 40 minutes to a bombed basement. The part that stayed with Dreyer, the part he described in his letter, was that Patton crouched in the doorframe, so the girl wasn't looking up at him. And that when she asked her question, he didn't hesitate. The girl wasn't helpless. That was the thing nobody had understood yet. She had been managing. She had kept 6 children alive for 3 days on half a sack of flour in a collapsed building in a city where everything was broken. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was waiting to find out if the people who wanted to move her could be trusted not to separate them. Patton came back up to street level. He did not address the chain of command about how the report had been handled. Not yet. He called for the field medical unit attached to the advance, not German civilian authorities, not a local official, not a church elder no one had vetted, his own people. He directed them to a commandeered building 2 streets over that was already secured and had heating. Then he told his aide, "The children move together. That is the order. No separations." He pulled Lieutenant Cobble aside, not in front of the others. "Civilian nuisance matter," he said, "is the wrong phrase. Find better words." Cobble said, "Yes, sir." Then Patton turned to his civil affairs officer and told him something that changed how the advance handled the problem from that point forward. He said he wanted a confirmed handoff location. German church infrastructure, a relief organization, something with standing and accountability, identified in each city before the column reached it. Not after. Not when men were already standing in front of a basement. Before. The civil affairs officer said he understood. Elsa carried the smallest child herself when they moved. She walked out of the basement and into the street, into daylight, and she did not look back at the building. The other children followed her. The field medics fell in around them, without crowding them. Patton's Jeep was already pulling away when she reached the top of the stairs. She watched it go. She didn't wave. She just stood there in the light, holding the child, watching the vehicle disappear around the corner. Dreyer described that image in his letter home. He said he didn't know her name at the time. He found out later. It was Elsa. He said she looked, standing there, less like a child who had been rescued, and more like someone who had decided the people in front of her could be trusted, and was watching to make sure they kept the agreement. The story didn't appear in any official Third Army report. It moved the way those stories moved, through letters, through mess tent conversations, through men repeating one detail to someone who repeated it to someone else. What survived was not a document. It was the shape of the moment. A general crouching in a doorframe. A girl asking one question. The answer coming back without hesitation. Patton's army was built for speed. That was its entire identity. Every hour mattered. Every delay cost something. And that day, he drove 40 minutes into a city he had already won. For 6 children in a basement. because a report landed on his desk and he didn't send it back down. Whether that was command or responsibility or something else entirely, that's worth thinking about. Another general might have written a sharper directive and never left his desk. Maybe that would have been enough. Maybe it wouldn't have. What's harder to explain is why Patton went himself, and why, out of everything that happened in those weeks, this is one of the things the men who were there kept talking about.